Hello, my name is Dmitri Pal. I'm Senior Engineering Manager, and today we will be talking about Identity Management Overview for RHEL 7. This is a special slide deck that I put together for this specific Tech Exchange event because there were specific questions that were brought up, and this slide deck tries to address those questions. So let's move to the agenda. So first of all, we will talk about the identity management introduction. Then we will compare where identity management and LDAP, compare them side by side and see where it's better to use LDAP and where it's better to use identity management. Then we'll talk about identity management and Active Directory integration, then opportunities and migration, client capabilities and different versions of the software. And there are a lot of pointers and resources in this slide deck. And then hopefully we'll have time for questions and answers, and you would be able to jump in and we will have a discussion or conversation about different aspects of identity management that you are interested in. So let's start with what is IdM, or identity management. It's IdM stands for Identity Management in Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That's the official name of the component and what we are selling and giving to the customers, well, selling as a part of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So it's based on the free IPA open source technology. And it is important to know that everything that goes into free IPA upstream lands pretty quickly in Red Hat Enterprise Linux as an identity management component. So in the past, the release cycle was very, very close. So there was not enough incubation upstream in Fedora. And that was an aggressive schedule that we would have been following to deliver the functionality as fast as possible. And now we are trying to have a little bit more testing and adoption in the upstream in Fedora before it lands into Red Hat Enterprise Linux. Thus, we are wrapping up, for example, right now, the release that will be a core for 7.1. So today we announced 7.0, and we are pretty much done with the functionality that we are planning for 7.1. So IPA stands for Identity Policy Audit, and we focus mostly on the identities and related policies. So that's how we define the policies, because policy is a loaded term, and there was a lot of confusion about what is policy and what is not, or what is our responsibility and what is not, because easily you can get into the systems and configuration management, and you don't want to be for the domain controller, for the identity server to be in business of configuration management. So where you draw the line between just configuration policies, security policies, and the policies that the identity server should be responsible. So we define the policies as identity-related policies. So you have identities, you have users, you have system accounts, you have service accounts, you have hosts. All those identities live in the system, and there are policies related to interaction of those identities with each other, with their keys, with their passwords, with their certificates, and so on. So the policies related to access control, to security of the communication, and so on, that's what in the domain of policies related to handled by identity management. Audit component has been planned from the very beginning. We made several attempts, several tries to do something on this front. And we realized that audit is bigger than the domain controller, than IPA. So audit should be really our company strategy and our company vision. I think that now that we have a management story through OpenLMI and Cockpit, maybe we will spend some time putting together an audit story and plan something that we can do as a company, because really collecting, processing, delivering, filtering, and correlating audit events, it's a big problem, and there are a lot of offerings on the market, both commercial and open source. And we need to understand where is our value as a company for the customers. And it might be that the main value is in the easy to use collection point, so that we can really stream the information from the nodes to the central location. And that location might not be identity management server. So that's a discussion to have, and let's move forward to other items on this in this slide. So main problems that IdM solves are, first, it is the server that brings the existing, or better to say, the older technologies that existed to the next level and works better as any of those individual technologies. LDAP, Kerberos, NIS, and PKI. So its goal is to take all those technologies, combine them together, and deliver them in an easy to use, easy to manage, easy to consume shape, and be very, very simple and very consumable for the administrators. The second important goal and problem that IdM solves is the bridging between the Linux infrastructure and Active Directory based infrastructure. So the modern data center has Active Directory in, as far as I know, in 97% of the enterprises. So that's where users live and manage. And then we bring, as a company, a value of RHEL and RHEL systems. And these RHEL systems need to coexist in a good way in the heterogeneous environment, in the environment dominated by the Active Directory. And in the past, there have been multiple solutions to integrate enterprise Linux into Active Directory environment. There are third-party solutions. There are just native simple tools like LDAP and Kerberos. There have been some Winbind. And now there is IdM, and I think that IdM does the best job out of all these options of empowering the administrators to really do their work well and to manage the infrastructure while enable Active Directory users to access the resources in this infrastructure. And we'll see more details about that in this slide. So next slide is marketing positioning. This slide was produced in 2011 when we first brought identity management as a part of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. I'm not going to talk about the content of this slide. So if you need the elevator pitch, that's the elevator pitch. So please read that, memorize it, and use it in the conversations with the customers. Architecture. So under the hood, there are several major different components. In the middle is the KDC. It's a key distribution center. It's the MIT Kerberos server that does the Kerberos authentication. It uses LDAP as a backend. So all the data for Kerberos KDC is stored in the LDAP backend instead of the traditional database. And then on the other hand, LDAP has all sorts of plugins that glue it together to KDC and use it in combination. The PKI component right now is represented by CA. So we have an embedded CA. It's optional, but it's recommended because that's what we use to issue certificates for hosts and services. And in the future, we'll use to issue it for certificates for users. There will be additional components that we're bringing in, for example, the DRM, the key store. We call it Vault. So that's the PKI component that will be a part of identity management quite soon, and will provide the capability of storing shared keys, symmetric and asymmetric keys. For example, for the use case when you have to store the accounts for the cloud provider. So, and you have management software that on your behalf, like CloudForms, does the management of payloads in different cloud environments. So it needs to log into Amazon and into Rackspace. So it needs to have accounts. And Vault provides a secure place where the keys are stored. It's really the government grade software, because that software is deployed in several governments all over the world. Well, in both hemispheres, I would say. So the DNS component is an optional DNS component based on Bind by 9. And we generally recommend using it because it simplifies the deployment and management. It's not required, but it's really convenient. So that's DNS component. Then there is a management framework that provides command line interface and web UI for the administrators to manage data inside the LDAP backend, to issue certificates, to manage DNS records and zones, and perform operations related to deploying master replica, doing replication agreements, and so on. And then there are Linux and Unix clients. The modern Linux clients have the client software that recognizes identity management. Unix software has support for generic protocols like Kerberos and LDAP. So they also can be configured to work with identity management, because identity management exposes the traditional Kerberos and LDAP protocols that clients understand, but they can't enjoy the advanced features that identity management provides for the modern Linux clients. So let's talk about the identity management and directory server. So it might sound confusing that we have an identity management offering and directory server offering in our portfolio, and that identity management is a part of the Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and it is free with the RHEL subscription, while the directory server is a layered product and requires a different subscription. So how to position these two solutions with the customer? The key question is, what are the identities that will be stored in the solution? So if we are talking about the internal enterprise identities, it being users or systems or services inside the enterprise, then it is the identity management play. It is tuned for that, it is good for that, and it is where it should be positioned. The directory server is better positioned when the customer is trying to build an application to serve its own clients and partners and its own ecosystem. So think about any kind of application that has a login on the internet. So they have either a database or an LDAP storage to back this application, to store the accounts, to do the authentication, and to control the policies related to the accounts, to the password change, to the password strength, and so on. So directory server is good for that kind of use. So if the customer is coming and saying, I want to build an application, a customer portal for my own customers, that's a directory server play. And the reason why it is sold is because it is in some ways more flexible and requires more support. So it means that it is more costly for us to support it, because it is more developer open tool than identity management. Identity management is more controlled. So we can compare one to another. There is a table on the next slide. So let's go through this table. So first of all, the use cases. As I mentioned, that Red Hat Directory Server is a general purpose directory server that can be used for any kind of the application. Yes, it can be used for internal identities too, as it has been in the past, but it it is easy replaceable. So that's kind of not interesting for us because our interest is to get into the customer environment, be strategic, and uh, stick in. So identity management provides extreme stickiness. Once you deploy it, once you leverage the identity management capabilities and use them, it's extremely hard to get rid of it and rip it out. So you are effectively on hook on that technology because this technology is very powerful and has a lot of convenience. And those customers who already deployed identity management, they like it, they love it, they want more of it, and they don't want to go back to directory server. Levels of integration. So directory server is flexible. You can pretty much do whatever you want. You can change the schema the way you want. You can change the location of containers in tree. You can change ACIs. So you in full control. With identity management, you have to play by the rules. And you can extend it, you can change it, but it is a much more controlled environment. And we in the development community recommend reaching out to us and working with us in upstream to make sure that you understand the rules and what you are planning and trying to do is not going to break the system. So there is a perception that it is like locked down and nothing can be done. That's wrong. It can be extended and it can be modified. You just need to play by the rules. So the schema that comes with the directory server, it is the default schema, while with identity management, it is optimized for the specific use case of serving the identities and authentication and policies for the inside the enterprise use case. Command line. So directory server has LDAP utilities and capability to manage instances, while identity management has a Python-based command line and also Python-based instance management. Identity management has a web UI, while the directory server has all the client console, which Java-based, which we want to replace with web UI, but that's not a priority and probably will rot and become obsolete over time, and we finally would have to do something with web UI. So there is still investment in the Red Hat directory server. We are not abandoning it, we are maintaining it and moving with it. There is a team doing the development there, but it's just small and there are other things that are higher priority than that. So DIT is the tree in the directory server. So in the directories in Red Hat directory server, it's standard and flexible, while in identity management, it is less hierarchical and optimized for the specific use case. The main authentication in directory server is LDAP, while the main authentication is Kerberos, and everything in identity management is around Kerberos. Kerberos is the key component. It can't be ripped off. It can't be taken away, and it brings its own complexity to the environment, but also a lot of benefits and a lot of value once the obstacles are removed. And obstacles usually are related to DNS name resolution, but I will talk about that a little bit later. AD integration with the directory server, you can synchronize users and groups both ways from Active Directory to directory server and back. While with IdM, you can synchronize only one way from Active Directory to IdM and only users. But in RHEL 7 that shipped today, we have a full support of cross-RAM Kerberos trusts, and we'll talk about what that means. Password policies in the directory server are based on LDAP, while in the identity management, they are based on Kerberos. There is a way to proxy authentication to the external identity source. In Red Hat directory server, it is done through PAM, while in the identity management, it's in a specific way with trusts. When you want the clients that do not understand trusts. You want them to be able to participate in trust relations, which means that users from Active Directory accessing like Solaris system or HPUX system or AX system that has no understanding of the trust relations. So these systems can be pointed to IdM, and IdM for them will keep a special view in the directory so that the users from Active Directory presented in this view, and thus it acts as a proxy. So it's a special proxy for this special use case for the legacy Linux clients and for Unix clients that do not understand trust. We'll talk about that again in more details later. Directory server supports multiple suffixes, so you can put users in multiple places, while in IdM, you would need to have a different domain. And there are some plans to have multiple IPA domain support and trust between IdM domains, but it's not on the near-term roadmap. So maybe a year and a half from now, as the requirements mature and the demand emerges. So directory server is a standalone product, and identity management is a part of Red Hat and present. So a little bit about comparison of
Dmitri?
the directory server. And yes.
Just quickly before you move on, we've got 3 questions in the chat. One from Siva and 2 from Andrew. And they were sort of like also in relation to the last slide. Would you be able to quickly just address them, or do you want to do that at the end of the deck?
Because I don't see I see the slides and I don't see the questions, I would prefer to do the presentation, run it through, and then answer questions, if that's okay with everybody.
All right, that's fine. Continue, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So directory server and OpenLDAP. OpenLDAP is a part of the platform, and we position it as a package. So it's supported on the package level. It's not supported on the enterprise level. So you can use OpenLDAP for developer, POC, or do yourself something in the corner. But if you want to go in production and you want enterprise level support, then the directory server is the recommended choice. Another question that we usually get is about the directory server and SunDS, and what's the relation and what we can do about this business. So in general, SunDS is more feature-rich. Sun did a very good job in tuning up performance and adding additional capabilities that are very advanced for the specific use cases. But these use cases are really specific, and not many customers take advantage of them. So it turned out that majority of the customers, when the prices went up for SunDS, started to look for a replacement, and majority of them are okay with reduced functionality that is provided by Red Hat Directory Server, and consider the move because of the price. So it is more or less a drop and replacement, drop in. You need to work it out, the migration story, because it depends on the version of SunDS. The newer version of SunDS, the harder it is to migrate, but it's still possible. So it's a good opportunity to step in and become a trusted partner. We had a telco company in Europe that was successfully converted from a SunDS into Red Hat Directory Server in a very, very complex environment with millions of entries, with a lot of performance requirements and a lot of load. And there was a lot major tune-up and improvements have been done in recent versions of Directory Server to meet those requirements and to make this migration possible. So I think that paves the way for us to even smoother replacement of some DS. And don't forget to mention IdM. People usually still would go for directory server and do the replacement, but they will consider identity management and see whether it actually solves their needs moving forward down the road. So I wanted to emphasize that it is okay to lose Red Hat directory server business to IdM. And this is because of the stickiness of IdM. Yes, you lose a little bit of revenue here, but it's also the cost of support and maintenance for us, and it is much easier for us to support IdM. We have more resources, we have more support, we have more training, we have more developers, and so on. So from the cost point of view, it's also much easier to support IdM, and it enables the whole portfolio. It's the foundation of everything we're doing. We're building it, integration into satellite, into CloudForms, into OpenStack, into Rev, and so on. So all these pieces are going to be pluggable, and identity management will provide key management, SSL management, identity management, authentication, single sign-on for those components in our portfolio. So that's what's happening. We're building these things. Some of these integrations you will see in the fall, in the products, in the CloudForms, in the Satellite 6. So the idea and the goal is to have identity management integrated with everything that we are offering as our portfolio. And really, identity management is the bloodstream for the identities across all the products and projects that we deliver to the customers. Okay, identity management and Active Directory. So there are actually two ways how enterprise Linux systems can be integrated with Active Directory. I touched on that a little bit earlier. So there is direct integration and indirect integration. So with direct integration, you connect Linux systems into Active Directory domain. And you can do it multiple ways. In the past, you were able to do it with just PAMLDAP or PAMCurl5 or NSSLDAP to do the identity lookups. Then Winbind existed. Winbind is a part of Samba. And then SSSD was born. So our preferred option is SSSD, and the reason why is because it is capable of pretty much everything that other components used to be able to do and more. So it is a default component of Enterprise Linux starting RHEL 6. It has been added at late versions of RHEL 5. It matured significantly since then, and nearly every release brings new functionality, and we'll see the details of that later in this slide. RealmD is the new component that was added in RHEL 7, and it allows to detect the presence of the domain controller in the environment. So it looks at the DNS and scans which servers provide the Kerberos and LDAP services, and pokes at the servers and services and determines whether it is Active Directory or IdM, and allows to configure SSSD automatically based on what it detected, whether it is Active Directory or IdM. It's a pretty cool, very simple to use tool. It's integrated with Anaconda. It's integrated. It has command line. It has I think it's also through the web UI in the desktop. So you can click a button, Enterprise Login, and it will configure your SSSD to work either with identity management or Active Directory. So that's for the direct integration. So what's important here is talking about SSSD and Winbind, why we moved from Winbind and now recommend SSSD. So let's look at the features that Winbind and SSSD have in common and what are the differences. So If you have it's important to know whether you require POSIX attributes or not. So both SSSD and Winbind do not require you to have POSIX attributes inside Active Directory. So if your customer Active Directory administrator says, I'm not going to enable services for Linux or identity management for Linux because that's against my policy, that's fine. SSSD and Winbind can work in this environment, both. So there's no difference between them. Identity mapping, so you have users, they're identified by SIDs, by special IDs in Active Directory, and you need to have POSIX attributes, GID and UID, in Linux, Unix. So you need to map one to another, and you need to do it dynamically. Winbind went through 8 iterations of those methods, trying to figure out what's the best method. And I think it came to some stable method, which is called read, RID, and that's what SSSD implemented. So it's compatible with Winbind with the best method that it provides. Active Directory specific controls, like over the time, Active Directory grew special controls to retrieve groups and group membership, to do it faster and easier. So in comparison to the standard LDAP group membership, and Winbind and SSSD understand those extended specific controls. CIFS integration, that's probably the only feature that is missing in SSSD. So if you are planning to use file sharing, then you still want to position Winbind. But if you are not going to use file sharing on the Linux system, then SSSD is a recommended choice. And starting 7.1, this gap will be closed, so there will be no need for Winbind anymore, and that's what we want to position. We don't want to maintain 2 different client-side components that do pretty much the same thing. So the idea is to make SSSD a replacement for everything, for all the NSS LDAP, PEMCARD5, Winbind, all those utilities of the past. So now with RHEL 7, features that have been added is the DNS site support. So now SSSD understands the DNS sites and can do the dynamic DNS updates, and it does it better than Winbind. And RealmD by default configures SSSD, but if you want Winbind to be configured, you can explicitly request to configure Winbind command lines. Okay, so back to the Active Directory integration. So IdM and AD indirect integration is done through the identity management when Linux systems are joined into the identity management domain. So SSSD is configured to look up and perform authentication against identity management. And then there is a trust relation. Trust relation is established once. It's established from identity management side to Microsoft Active Directory Forest. It's a cross-forest trust. It requires administrator credentials to do that. So effectively, you need to walk the Active Directory admin to the console or command line, do the work once, and then there is no other need for them to do anything about it. So identity management, view it in this case as a resource domain. So it will manage systems, it would manage hosts, it would manage services. It would allow you to define policies for external users coming into Linux infrastructure, but the users and their groups will be in Active Directory, and Active Directory part of your enterprise would still have the control of users and groups. So what trusts give you? The trusts give you the way of exposing Linux resources to Active Directory users. I mentioned it.
Dmitri, it's Martin here. are you still on the line? Because we've lost your audio. Can you hear me? Okay, so my voice apparently can be heard, which is good. I think Dmitri will probably try to dial back in again. He might have lost internet connectivity. Give us a couple of ticks. We're still waiting for Dmitri. I'm not sure what happened to him. Maybe he ran out of battery on his laptop or something. I've got no idea. I'll probably try to get in touch with Quinton. In the meantime, if you guys can just hold and get a coffee or have a bio break.